As for me, my name is James Blessman. I'm one of the faculty in the department. I will start by saying my hat, you will always find me in this hat. I don't wear this hat to be cool. I think I am cool. That's not why I wear the hat, though. Yeah, so the hat basically has 4 principles on it. It kind of serves as my vision board, including my vision, where it says the D gets an A, because I believe in this concept called social fitness, and I have a citizen report card. And my vision is to create a city of A's. I'm kind of in the social fitness and that type thing. And I will retire my hat when 50% of the people are filling out the report card and we're getting 8 out of 15 A's. So if you want to help me get rid of the hat, find the report card, take your score, that will count towards my, 600,000 or so people that need to take this deal. And I have no idea how it's going to happen. But let me just say a little thing about health and why I think these conversations are so important. You know, we find ourselves in a country that is at the bottom of the list in terms of health outcomes, okay, compared to every other developed nation. We find ourselves in a state which is in the bottom third of all the states in the country. We find ourselves in a county that is in the bottom 5% of all the counties in Michigan. And what that means is the conditions and the behaviors that can be associated with poor health are so common, we can begin to think of them as normal. It's almost as though the abnormal is becoming normal, right? And the other thing that I will point out about health, which is interesting, is that if I were to cut you, I wouldn't do that, but I'm just saying if you were to cut yourself, that's what Sunshine is going to correct me on that. Your body will automatically send in platelets to stop the bleeding. It will send in white cells to prevent infection. It'll send in fibroblasts to scar down. You will not have to make one decision about that. There is a wisdom to your body that gets you back on track, right? That will allow you to heal yourself. Now, you can't screw it up by doing one or two things. You can create what I call an error of omission. So let's say your body says, hey, we need some vitamin C down here. And well, we don't have any. Well, that's what I'm going to need. Well, I don't know what to tell you. Figure it out. Okay? That's an error of omission. Or error of commission. So let's say you keep spreading that wound apart, right? Create, something that the body doesn't want to have happen that we are doing. You'll have trouble healing. So as long as you don't create an error of omission or error of commission, your body will find its way back to health, okay? So today's discussion is a little bit about, one of these errors of commission, maybe experiencing something that you probably shouldn't experience. And I would say when we do these discussions, people have found these ECHATs very helpful. I'll just point out one of our prior ones just found out that one of our participants, we had one on water, and because of what they did, some things that they learned in that deal, they checked, they found a water leak in their home. Their water bill dropped by about $150, okay? So I'm just saying you could find some information at these discussions to be a benefit to you. No pressure to today's presenters, okay? People looking like, how you gonna help me out? But we do try to provide some information of value to you. So with that, we have 3 presentations. And the way we usually do these, they go pretty quickly. They will provide some information for you. We'll allow for a couple questions, and there'll be some questions, some time allowed at the end as well, okay? I'd also like to throw a shout out to Sacred Heart. We appreciate you for this fantastic place and being here, and very grateful for that. So with that, I think I'd like to bring up Dr. John Reiners, who will tell you a little bit about himself as well, who's one of our researchers, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about air quality. So if we could, a little thank you for Dr. Reiners.
Thank you, James. As James said, my name is John Reiners. I'm a professor at Wayne State Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. And I've been here at Wayne State for about 27 years. By profession, I'm really a rat physician. That's how my mother described me. I'm a basic bench scientist, or at least I was for about 35, almost 40 years of my career. But 10 years ago, I got really interested in air pollution and consequences of air pollution. And I'll tailor my talk, towards that. So air, what's it consist of? Well, it's pretty simple in its most elementary form. It's about 78% nitrogen, 19% oxygen, a little bit of argon, and a little bit of CO2. All of those components have no color, no smell, and no taste. So we're talking about air in its purest form as something that's pretty neutral. But, here in Detroit, there are certainly days when you go outside and you go, there's color, I can smell it, and I can taste it. So where's this stuff coming from? Well, air pollution, can be contributed by natural sources, and when I'm saying natural, okay, things like volcanoes in Hawaii are a big thing, but we don't have any volcanoes. Forest fires, but we haven't had any real forest fires around here to contribute. And then there are things like tree pollens and that, which, we all have allergies to. But when we think about pollutants, the ones we're really thinking about are the ones that, we're making, the man-made ones. So mobile sources, cars, diesel trucks, etc. They're spewing out lots of different things. And then we have industry. And depending upon where you are in the city of Detroit, some places are much better than others, but, we have steel plants, we have lots of refineries, we have asphalt plants, paint plants, we have refinishing chromium places, dry cleaning stores, and most relevant to this group, not very far away, you have the largest municipal incinerator in the United States. Okay, so all of these things basically are contributing to what we're calling, materials in the air, pollutants, and some of those pollutants are hazardous agents. The EPA has a list of about 187 things that they call essentially air toxics. And of that, there's a subgroup that's called criteria chemicals. That's sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, lead, and carbon monoxide. And these are agents that are basically monitored by the EPA, and in this case, the MDEQ. Now, a really important thing to know about the monitoring is that here in Detroit, depending on what year we're talking about, you basically have anywhere between 4 to 7 sites that are actually monitoring your air. And a really important thing to know about that is that these sites don't all monitor these 6 criterion compounds. Some of them only monitor 1 or 2, and there's only really one site in the city of Detroit that monitors essentially most, if not all of them. City of Detroit's about 140 square miles. It's pretty big. So when you look at what the MDEQ is reporting in terms of your air pollution, you're not really getting a good idea of what's happening. I was involved about 10 years, 11 years ago in a study in which a group of us, in conjunction with, this is from Wayne State, Henry Ford, and state of Canada, or state, country of Canada, did a high-resolution air pollution study here in Detroit and Windsor in which we monitored over a 2-year period over 100 sites, 80 of those sites in the city of Detroit itself. And the take-home message from those studies is that air pollution is a neighborhood thing. In other words, if you were to look at our maps of air pollution, et cetera, you would see that there are certain areas that have much higher concentrations of certain pollutants. And that's really critical because the EPA/MDEQ's measurements of air pollution are for this huge broad area. They're painting broad strokes. But the message I'm trying to get across to you is basically air pollution is at a neighborhood thing. So I'm here talking to, you know, an audience that's probably pretty concerned about essentially that incinerator. So what do we know about the incinerator? In the last 5 years, it's been cited well over 500 times, basically for producing too much NO2 and sulfur dioxide. And these are compounds that are associated with the production of ozone. And there have been other things that are generated by the incinerator. What are the consequences to you? Well, we know, and I'm not saying that this is directly related to the incinerator, I'm just talking about classes of air pollutants in and by themselves. We know that they're certainly associated with the development and the triggering of asthma. Essentially, Detroit has an extraordinarily high incidence of asthma across the state. But there are also certain areas of Detroit that have even higher incidences of asthma, one being southwest Detroit, the other is areas downwind of the incinerator. We also know that air pollution is associated with cardiovascular effects, meaning it can increase your blood pressure, your heart rate, it can increase possibilities of stroke, etc. Some of the toxins that are released and found in air pollution are carcinogens and can cause a host of cancers. And then there are other effects that are associated with, like, adverse birth outcomes. Detroit has an extraordinarily high, about 16 to 17% of all births in Detroit are preterm. I was associated with a study that was funded by the Kellogg Foundation a couple years ago, and we're only now at the point of actually writing the data up, that shows that there is a very good correlation between volatile organic chemicals here in Detroit air and preterm birth. And then there's another thing about air. It's regulated by, or it's a concern of the MDEQ, Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, and that's smell. So I know that in this area, if you have a concern about odors, that you can essentially call a number and make a report. But the issue with smell is, it's a situation that it's really kind of hard to contribute essentially a health effect to. You know, it's not like a chemical that's a known carcinogen that we know, you know, can damage DNA or it can have other effects upon cells. You know, how do you measure something like, you know, the effect of a smell? And I think the bottom line there, and I just want to plant this idea in your heads, is that it induces stress. Now, I'm a distance runner, and I work right over here in the medical center, and I go out on some of my long-term runs going eastward, and there have been times where I've been out there running where the smell is so bad that I've gagged as I've run. So I know what it's like. Okay, what does stress do? Well, I'm going to tell you a really simple experiment that was done with rats. And it was a study to assess the effects of air pollution, you know, in the context of stress. And what they did was they had 2 batches of rats in cages that the rats could see each other. And it was a situation, rats love mealworms. It's like candy to them. One set of rats they gave mealworms to. The other set of rats they didn't give the mealworms to. The rats that didn't have the mealworms saw the rats that were getting the mealworms and absolutely freaked out. Blood pressure in those rats went up, heartbeat went up, they released cortisol, classic examples of stress. And then they looked at the effects of what happens when you pipe in, air pollutants to them. And they saw that the stressed rats basically had a much more adverse effect than the non-stressed rats. So it's kind of hard to quantify that in one's life, but the fact that something like stress is, important to your health. Who's most susceptible to the adverse effects of like bad air? Certainly the elderly, certainly those who already have chronic conditions, but then we also have children, neonates, and pregnant mothers and the fetuses. And I want to emphasize this issue on pregnancy and fetuses. We now know that exposure of moms to certain things that can be in contaminated air can predispose those children, so they're still in the fetal stage. They haven't been born yet. What I'm saying is if you expose the moms to certain agents that are found in some bad samples of air, that it predisposes them to obesity, it can affect their intellectual and their behavioral capacities, and it can predispose them to the development of asthma and allergies. So, the air that we're breathing is not only affecting us, it's affecting future generations. So what can we do? What can you do about your bad air? And I don't really have the answers to that, except, and I wish I did, but I can make a couple suggestions. And that is, in the case of the incinerator, keep pestering the city of Detroit. Keep bugging them and telling them, hey, we want this to go away. If I remember, or if I'm correct, the relicensing of that facility is coming up again in like a couple years. Put your vote behind politicians who I know who will support you, who will actually, make a plea at the state level to have the MDEQ be much more effective in enforcing essentially the violations that they've picked up at the incinerator. And at that, I usually have a tendency to talk too late, or too long, but I think I'm done. Yeah.
Has anyone from Canada made comments or complaints about the air from our city affecting their health?
The Canadian government is concerned about what comes across the river from us, and although we don't really think about it, we share the air shed. Their air comes also this way too. So it's a common air shed, and we're sharing our air. They don't seem to be, at this point, too really concerned about it. They're concerned about the power plant submissions, particularly the sulfur dioxide, which we're constantly basically not in compliance with. Yeah. I honestly cannot answer that question, but I'm assuming that they most likely are.
All right, so in terms of reporting the air pollution and the smell, to what authority do you report the complaint about the smell or air pollution? And is there a specific way that to phrase your complaint in order to make it the most effective?
Actually, I think this audience can probably answer this question better than I can, but my knowledge of the situation is... Okay, I was going to say, there is a telephone
Okay.
number that you can respond to.
So maybe what we'll do is we'll kind of segue into our next presenter, who I think was, you're a plant, clearly, to ask the question. Was there another part to your question?
Well, I mean, I guess just thinking about it, about twice a week I drive through Boynton 48217, and every single time I have to like roll up the windows to my car because the smell is so overpowering. And that doesn't seem like something that fluctuates from day to day. It seems to be pretty consistent. And so I guess why haven't they been forced to change something such as the smell? Because there are houses quite close to there.
And you want to touch on that too? Maybe. Okay, so we will have, we're not going to leave without some type of response to you, but I want to make sure that we get done with our presentations and before we try to get to a question like that, if that's all right.
All right.
All right?